All right, well, I am actually really excited about this. I have been so excited to. Honestly, of all of the faiths that we studied, the Baha'i faith was the most interesting to me and the most, honestly, the most attractive to me as well. Okay, so let's get this started. So, the first question. In your understanding, what are important similarities between the Baha'i faith and Christianity, and what are the differences?
So I looked at the questions. I didn't think a lot about how to answer them, so it might take me a little.
That's okay. We have time.
Okay, so differences and similarities. I think the most important similarities are that I'm trying to differentiate between like what I've heard most of my Christian friends say about what Christianity is, and then the understanding of Christianity and the Baha'i faith.
Mm-hmm.
That some things I've been like, oh wait, I didn't know that. But that we believe that like God is a higher power, God is creation, a lot of the ideas of God are the same,
Mm-hmm.
and that we believe that Christ has an exalted station above human, and then depending on the sect of Christianity, but like most Christian sects exalt him at the station of God, and so one of the big differences is that Baha'is see Christ as a manifestation of God, and that like if, as he says in the Bible, I am God, that statement is true, as like he is what humanity has to see God through.
Okay, yeah.
But we don't believe that he is at the same level, and that we believe that God is like one and like above our understanding and even our exaltation.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I think another, but it depends on who you talk to, because my roommate last semester grew up evangelical Christian in Ohio, but then other friends of mine who are different denominations have said different things, but I was talking to her, and somehow, what's it called? Original sin came up, and I was like,
yeah.
Oh, you guys don't believe in original sin, though? And she's like, no, we're Christian, we do. And I was like, wait, what? That was one of those things that I didn't realize. Like, I thought it was part of the Old Testament, that then when Christ came, we no longer had original sin because he had erased it with his sacrifice. But I think that's also something different with the Baha'i faith, because we believe that each individual is born noble, and that like we have the capacity for bad, and that like you need to train children so they'll go a good way. But I think that was interesting, because then like she was talking about how her mom is like very concerned for her and says sometimes like, Katie, you're going to hell. And she's like, and it's not like a thing where I'm like, oh, how could you say that, Mom? And it's like, oh, I understand you're concerned for me. Like, oh, whoa, okay. I didn't know there was that relationship, but it's interesting because then it puts into context a lot of my friends who are like worried that I'm not Christian and things. They're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. If you think I'm going to hell, like really, like my soul has not been saved, then I would also be worried for me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I have a friend who, he's a year under me, and he still goes to my high school, and he's atheist. And like the first like part of our friendship was so hard for me to like step back and be like, okay, you don't have to evangelize him. Like I pray for him and I do care about him, and because of that I have talked to him about Christ and like what I believe to be true about sin. But then at the same time, it's been so humbling to just step back and be like, look, okay, I need to stop pushing this on him, because if it's a decision that he has to make. I had another thought, but I can't remember it. Yeah. Oh, I remember. It's interesting also that you brought up about Muhammad, or about Jesus, because in studying Islam, we figured out that that's how the Muslims see Jesus as well. Is that he's not God incarnate, that he's a prophet of God, or, as you guys say, a manifestation of God. So
yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you take to be the significance of these similarities and differences? And then she rephrased it to say, why do the similarities and differences matter? of a weird question.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think, because I was thinking of the difference between the relationship between God and humans, if you see the manifestation as God, but then I feel like the relationship isn't that different. I mean, like, people often in the Baha'i faith also, like, pray to Baha'u'llah as they're praying to God, and, like, in my mind, I see that as, like, very similar to people praying to Christ, as, like, like, this is what we have, and, like, if people believe that, like, he is also God, like, that, I don't know, I feel like that one doesn't matter very much.
But that, I mean, I think that also, that makes sense. And I think that it is a significant difference.
Yeah.
It's just easy to relate. Like,
Yeah.
it's easy for me to relate to that you pray to Baha'u'llah sometimes, and I pray to Jesus. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah. I'm wondering, what is the context of matter? Because, so I worked in Indianapolis for a year in, like, grassroots community building programs that are inspired by the Baha'i faith. And there's one, none of the families we were working with were Baha'i. But all of them, like, knew we were Baha'i, knew the programs were inspired, or some of them were directly Baha'i. And one family, in this refugee neighborhood, I can't remember if I talked about it last time.
I don't know if you did, but I think some of the people at the Baha'i Center that we went to talked about it. I don't remember if you mentioned it too, but I'm familiar with it.
Cool, yeah. And so many of those families, since they are refugee families, have a church or churches that they're linked to for support. And so there's one time I was in the house of one of those families that they, like, live very close to me. I was very close to. They're still, like, the family I see the most when I go back to Indy. And one of the women from the church there was very concerned for me being Baha'i, and, like, was talking to me about false prophets. And at first I was like, and I was like, oh, I get what you're saying. But I think that is often a big concern for people, particularly when you're working with children. If coming from a Christian community, people find out you're Baha'i, it can be very worrying that you're misleading someone in their relationship with God and their relationship with Christ. And that's been an interesting thing to maneuver around and to address, as, like, I taught children's classes, and children's classes are one of the section of the community building programs that we're doing there that are explicitly Baha'i, not for the point of converting or those things, but that, like, the moral basis we operate on is a Baha'i one, but it's one that can be, like, is related to all religions, and, like, we're happy if parents are concerned to, like, go over the curriculum with them before class and those things. But in class, when things would come up, like, you know, talking about religions, kids will ask you, like, do you believe in the Trinity? And Christ is God, right? And it's interesting being like, okay, well, I'm not going to try to undermine the parents' authority, of course. And I want to open the children to other perspectives, but not in a way that their parents would find disrespectful or that would cause them trouble. And so it's been interesting trying to think of how, when, like, some of these fundamental beliefs of how you relate to God and, like, who you see as the person you are learning from, praying about, learning through, like, spiritual reality through, how to relate those things. And I don't know, I guess that's how it matters, because it affects how we interact with each other. Hopefully not in a bad way, though, you know, interacting is difficult sometimes.
Yeah. We were actually, because today was technically our last day of class, and so a couple of us got together after class and got lunch together. And that's one of the things that Professor Yonker was talking about, because we were talking about, like, what we believe to be, like, the basics of Christianity, and some of the things that, like, if we didn't believe in the Trinity, how would faith be different? And it's amazing how, like, those little things that you don't really think would be that important really do cause so much. That's kind of a cool practical way to look at it too. I hadn't thought about that. Okay, nope, never mind. I changed question 4 because I felt like it was kind of offensive and I didn't like that. So, but anyway, we'll go to question 3. So, in your experience, what ways do Christians typically misunderstand the beliefs held by the Baha'i?
I think the most common misunderstanding, which I can't remember if I've specifically heard from Christians, but I've heard generally from people I've talked to the faith about, and since most of the U.S. is Christian, I assume many of those people were Christians, is that the Baha'i faith is just taking little things from other religions and putting it together. And I think that's, like, when we talk about unity and, like, the main message, and usually the main thing people start talking about when they introduce the Baha'i faith to someone is unity, it makes sense how that, like, misconception is raised, and I think part of it is, like, as Baha'is, not being scared to say the name Baha'u'llah, and to be like, no, like, we are different, and it's okay, and we don't need to be scared of people, like, judging us for that, like, we can just all work on accepting each other's differences, and so I think it is that, because since, like, we do believe Baha'u'llah is the manifestation for this day, and that it is his revelation we are following, but we don't believe his revelation means the other revelations are wrong. I think that is misinterpreted to be like, follow whatever you want, when in the Baha'i faith it's that the revelation of Baha'u'llah is what is, the word tinkered comes to mind, but that doesn't seem dignified enough, is made, I guess, for this time in history, and the capacity of humanity now. Yeah.
It's interesting that there could be two extremes to that, where there could be, like, the extreme of you're just, like, wary of mixing other religions, and so then you're skeptical of it, but then, like, on the flip side of it, just kind of being all accepting and all. I wondered this, and we had our final presentations today, and so I kind of did a little bit of my own research into what the Baha'i faith would say about this, but do you believe that all religions worship the same God, even if they're not within, like, the 9 prophets? So, like, for example, like, Native American traditional religions, or, like, is Catholicism included in, well, I guess Catholicism would fall under Christianity, but I guess just other religions, would they fall under worshiping the same God?
My understanding, yes. And there are things in the Baha'i writings that talk about Native Americans and those, like, faiths that aren't necessarily monotheistic. Is that the right word? Yeah. And that, like, the way I see it personally, which I think is what the faith would also say, is that since, like, God is unknowable and so high, and, like, the creator of everything and those things, that faiths that, like, worship creation as God, like, creation we believe is God. It is God's creation, so that would also be worshiping the same God. Yeah.
That makes sense. That's kind of where I came to, is that it would just, and also I made a few assumptions, and I don't like to do that, but I did, just in order to get the project done. But, like, just kind of assuming that based on, like, the premise that there is one God and there are different manifestations of him throughout history, and, like, even in Hinduism and Buddhism, like, the polytheistic, it's just different attributes of God. So that confirms that for me. Thank you.
About Hinduism and Buddhism, my dad replied to my long message with a text saying, "How are you?" And at the time, I was just like, okay, I need to call him later. And so I keep forgetting. But when I call him, I will let you know more about that, because I also am like, wait, what is it? But haven't called him yet.
Do you guys... You said that there were, like, 3 or 4 other Baha'i believers in Richmond, right? Do you guys meet together regularly?
We meet together, yes. Regularly is less definite, because there are only 4 or 5 of us, depending on who's in town. often we schedule things like 2 or 3 days in advance, but with the interfaith devotional that we've held regularly in the past, we're trying to make it more regular, because before we just plan it month to month.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to try to do those every month, and so, like, we already have the next one planned, which I should have sent you the information, but forgot.
That's
so
okay. I forgot about it, too.
No worries. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. I think that's our goal for meeting
Yeah.
regularly. And then other times they're just like, hey, we have this holy day. What are we going to do? Or like, did you read at all about 19-day feasts?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have feasts. We usually schedule it like a week in advance or something.
Okay. I was just thinking the next time that I'm in Richmond, I would definitely love to meet up and talk with you guys, or even the interfaith group that you mentioned. We actually talked about interfaith on like 2 or 3 days ago. We had a speaker come in from, I don't know where, but he was some sort of interfaith guy. So, so yeah, I would definitely love to do that, and I can let you know the next time that I'll be in town.
Yeah, and a lot of us are pretty flexible, so we could probably get together too, just when you come in.
I would also really love to see Earlham. I have driven by Earlham for like years, and I have never stopped. My aunt works for the theater in Richmond. She usually does the costuming, and so she tells me about this thing that they do with the graveyard by there every year, and so I've been in the graveyard by Earlham, but I've never been in Earlham, and I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's not that exciting, but I've been here for like almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, we should probably finish these. Okay. Oh, yeah, I changed the fourth question because I didn't like it, and I felt like it was insensitive. So, why do you choose your faith, and what about it is the most meaningful to you personally?
For me, a lot of it is that it makes the world make sense, and that that's part of it. That's when I was younger. That was when I thought about why am I Baha'i. Usually, what I said, and it's still a big part of my faith now, is that with the view of history and the Baha'i faith and the view of what the world is, what humans are, and what the world's moving towards, makes a lot of sense for me, and then also is something it's hard to say, and something I believe in things. I'm like, well, why do I believe in it, and those things. But then now I think I've like truly felt a connection with God through the Baha'i faith, and a connection with humanity as a whole, and through like seeing that the service that I've done is done in relatively the same way, like on every continent, maybe even Antarctica, so maybe like continent.
You have penguin Baha'is.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. And I think that's really made me feel like, you know, the faith is something that, like, spiritually I progress through and I try to learn about and I see as divine and true, and a lot of that might be because that's how I was brought up, but then, like, the practice of the faith has really, I think, confirmed me that, like, yes, maybe this is how I brought up and I didn't get a lot of choice in maybe what I believed in because it was just my foundation of functioning as a child, but I feel like the practice of the faith globally really, like, proves to me, like, yeah, this is it, and this is, like, kind of the burden humanity has to move forward and improve ourselves. That is so much of the Baha'i faith, and I shouldn't maybe say burden, but, like, responsibility. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I've been really wrestling with that too, like what you mentioned about just saying that you believe in it. Like that's something I've really been wrestling with, especially with this class, just being confronted with so many religions. And we went to Detroit and went to a Jewish synagogue, a mosque, and an evangelical church that was the most frustrating church I've ever been to, simply because of I don't want to go into it because I get really fired up, but yeah, just like knowing why I believe what I believe, and not just like I want to make it my own faith and understanding. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Baha'i faith was so attractive to me, is just because it reconciles so many questions. Like, it answers questions.
Yeah. There's a book called Some Answered Questions.
Really?
Yeah, that's written by Abdul Baha.
I want to write that down.
Yeah. A new translation just came out of it too, so it's been expanded. But that was something that I think one of the first things when I was like in middle school or something, my mom was like, "Hey, do you want to read this to know more about the faith?" It's like, I wasn't just a kid anymore. It's time for me to start learning. And I remember being like, "Whoa!" Like, so many things that I wondered are like there are actual answers for that I can go and find.
Yeah.
Like so my parents got divorced when I was like 10, and I immediately started reading the Book of Laws, because it talks a bit about divorce and finding there like an understanding of how we're supposed to be in life, and being able to see that, like, even though maybe it's only like 5 or 6 or 4, maybe even 3 paragraphs, I haven't read it recently, about divorce there, like, understanding that in this faith there's even like this very personal, like, difficult thing that's happening for me, it talks about this, and like, this is the manner that my parents are going about it, and this is why, and it's because of these principles. And that was I've just been realizing recently how much that affected me, being like, no, this is true.
Yeah. That definitely leaves me with things to think about. Okay. What is something that you would really like Christians to know or understand about your faith? And feel free to be honest. I promise that I don't, like, I'm open-minded.
So the thing that I'm always hesitant to share with Christians, because you never know what the reaction is, and there's a quote in the faith, like, that basically says, say things when people are ready for them. Mm-hmm. Don't push things on people. Sometimes it's better not to speak than to speak. Is that we believe that Baha'u'llah is the return of Christ. And, like, I truly believe that, and have so many Christian friends who are, like, waiting or worried that why hasn't he come yet? When he comes, it's going to be wonderful. I know he's going to come soon. And I just want to say to them, like, he has come. Like, this is the revelation. Like, so many of the things you're looking for, like, they're here. But often I feel like it wouldn't be appropriate. Either they're not ready to hear it, or it's something that I feel in that moment is between them and God and their path. Mm-hmm. I have one friend who, she was like, "Hey, Dean, I feel like Christ is coming soon." And at that time, I was just like, "Yeah, he's come. His name's Baha'u'llah." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're so crazy." Which, luckily, she says often, so I don't think it, like, shook her at all. But she's like, "Just another thing Nadine said."
That's really funny. I mean, not funny, but it's funny with your
I was
friend.
glad it went that way.
Yeah.
One of my friend's dads actually became Baha'i he heard a Baha'i say, like, Christ has come again, this is him, and he, like, stood up to beat the man up. It was like, "What are you saying?" And, like, talked to him, and he was like, "Oh, okay." And then a few years later, he was like, "You guys aren't crazy." But it's interesting hearing that response, because I know I'm trying to imagine I don't know what the equivalent would be for me. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I want people to know, because I feel like if people knew that,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same kind of concept as, like, somebody who's Christian wanting somebody to know that Jesus died for them, and, like, it's the same kind of compassion that I see in that.
Yeah, I hear a lot among Baha'is and among my closer Christian friends that we've gotten to a level where they can say it, that, like, wanting what you have found and you have found to be so uplifting and spiritual and grounding for you, for other people, and just wishing that they could just know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like the way I know or you know, like just, you know, just like some kind of mind melding. Like,
Yeah.
oh.
That's one thing that I really respect about your faith is the personal investigation of truth. Like, that principle, coming from a Christian standpoint who is really, and I've just really discovered this in the last couple weeks, is like, I'm just so dissatisfied with the state of, like, the believers that I see around me, especially, like, the church that we went to on Sunday was such a representation of how just icky Christianity has gotten. And I wish that people would just look for themselves to seek out who God is, because God has done that for us. He has sought us out, and he does that for each and every person, whether it be through, Jesus or Muhammad or how do you say his name? Is Baha'u'llah? Baha'u'llah. Okay, I've avoided saying it because I don't know how to say it.
No worries.
But yeah.
That's something I try to remind my friends of, is that, because especially people coming to the U.S. from Muslim countries and those things, there's so much fear of the Christian community. Like yeah, some things like have gotten bad in our interpretation of the Word of God and our like following of things that are not the Word of God, but like there's so much good. Like, I promise you, it just doesn't get on the news.
Yeah. Well, and that hurts my heart. That really does.
A lot of people, though, when who come and are strong in their faith and want that to be part of their lives, they find the other faith communities that are different that are strong in that. Like one of my Muslim friends who because she came to the Midwest, like doesn't wear a hijab, like she really would like to, but doesn't feel safe doing it.
Yeah.
But there was like 1 week that was very hard for her, and she's like, let's go to a church, because that was her place of prayer and safety in the U.S. that she had found. She'd gone to a Catholic high school for a year, and it was, the situation was unfortunate of her being like, I'm at my breaking point, I need God right now. But it was wonderful that she was like, and I'm going to find that, like being able to sit and pray in a church. And it was like, yeah, we got God everywhere.
That's awesome. See, and that makes, like, if I were to tell that to, like, my parents, and just knowing their generation and how strong their faith is, they would be up in arms about that. And that doesn't seem right to me. I don't like that. I don't want to be that person, that Christian that discourages and causes more division and fear between religions. I don't know. Sometimes I wish I could fix the world's problems, but I can't.
Well, we can't. But, it's in the small things that then help the big things move.
Yeah. You're right. I needed to hear that today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to stop recording this now.
Okay.